What's up, everyone? So, yesterday I made a video saying that I wanted to buy a banned Nintendo Switch 2. It seemed to have garnered a mixed reaction out of people. Now, I mentioned that I was interested in doing so because I wanted to tinker. And seemingly, not everyone completely understood what I was talking about. Or perhaps they understood what I was talking about, but they still felt it would be better for me to avoid the Switch 2 altogether. Which is completely fair. Okay, so right off the bat, I'll just say this. I've changed my mind. I'm not going to be buying it, and I'm going to explain why in the next few minutes. But I do want to point out that since the beginning, I've been saying that my boycott is basically against giving money directly to Nintendo. So I am not opposed to buying things secondhand. I am not opposed to buying it used later on. The primary reason I haven't done so yet is because, number one, it's still overpriced in my mind. It's not worth buying used. And number two, there aren't really any used consoles up for sale yet. Technically, you could buy it from a scalper, but that would be secondhand, and a scalper is not an end user, so that doesn't really count anyway. My money going towards a scalper is effectively a sale for Nintendo. Now, as far as the banned consoles are concerned, in my mind, that was fair game, because it's like, I'm buying a significantly cheaper piece of hardware, so for price-wise, it makes sense to me. And at the same time, it's not going directly to Nintendo. But there were 2 or 3 comments that people pointed out, which actually made sense to me, in that if I'm buying a banned Switch 2 from somebody that's realistically going to turn around and buy another Switch 2, that's helping with the sales going towards Nintendo. Whereas if I was to buy one that was used from somebody that didn't want it anymore, that person is not going to go back and buy another Switch. So through most of the comments, I was kind of like, I mean, in fairness, I've said that I would buy one secondhand, it's acceptable. And I'm buying this for nefarious reasons, we'll call it that. But those comments specifically that pointed out that if I was to help somebody who got banned go back and buy another Switch 2, those ones kind of got to me and made a lot of sense to me. So I've since changed my mind. I do think it's kind of funny though, because I don't have FOMO for the console. I don't have FOMO for the games. The only thing I have FOMO for right now is that people are out there getting banned and I'm not one of them. That's usually kind of up my alley. Not necessarily me getting banned, but being part of that discussion, part of that circle, where people are like testing out to see what's banned and what gets you banned and what doesn't get you banned and whatnot. But whatever, that's not really important enough for me to be a part of, especially if it means that it's going to lead to more sales for Nintendo. And I should point out, and I mentioned this in a few of my comments as well, my intention was not to get the Switch 2 and then start, playing the games and making videos about them. That's the last thing I want to do right now. I don't really want to make video reviews about Mario Kart World, just because I feel like that would be good advertisement for the Switch 2, and they don't really deserve that kind of attention. My goals were specifically to be around the discussion of banned consoles and what they can do and can't do. But like I said, I've since been convinced otherwise, and I think I'm going to just sit this one out. Now, in the meantime, since a lot of people didn't quite understood what I meant when I said I like to tinker, I figured this is as good of a time as any to show you guys some of my favorite tinkerings, we'll call it. Now, this title's called MODDED Nintendo 64 because I didn't know what else to call it, to be honest. The 64 itself is not modded, but it's what I have done with it to make it a little bit more enjoyable for myself and my friends and family on game nights. Now, this 64 itself is not my original Nintendo 64. It's actually my cousin's Nintendo 64. Somewhere along the line over the course of the past few years, every console just kind of ended up at my house because this is usually where people come for game nights. For a long while, it wasn't the case because I lived in an apartment and I was moving around a bit. But after we kind of settled down and I started setting up my office/game room, this just kind of became the de facto place for hangout nights. So for the Nintendo 64, obviously the biggest issue that we had at the start was that we could not connect it to HDMI. A lot of people like to get better outputs in there and everything. I've just opted for the cheap $25 Hyperkin cable. It worked out for me. It's not going to get you the best quality, but it gets the job done. If I want better quality, I have other means of getting better quality for Nintendo 64 games. The other issue we had was that the Nintendo 64 controllers, well, their joysticks kind of go out bad pretty quickly. And not just that, the cables on the controllers are really short. Back in the day, you used to hover around the TV when you're playing video games. Now there's a little bit more distance between you and the television. So what I eventually ended up doing was looking up a wireless Nintendo 64 controller that I enjoy. Now, since I've bought these, I've seen better ones come out, but at the same time, since I bought these ones, I never felt like I wanted to get any other ones. But these are also the Hyperkin Nintendo 64 wireless controllers. I got 4 of them, and they just plug it in the front, and you can put a memory card in there if you need to. And there's a little SD card slot too, which allows you to transfer memory card saves from the internet if you'd like, which is something that I do if I don't feel like beating a game and just want to have a completed save file. Now, these things are kind of ugly, but the cool thing is they come with multiple different colors. So it does give you that Nintendo 64 feel. The buttons are placed in a natural position that feel like it's consistent with the Nintendo 64, and the feel of everything just kind of works, I guess, if you're playing. The only problem is the joystick is a little bit smaller than the Nintendo 64 controller. And I don't know if you guys have seen the way the sensitivity of the Nintendo 64 controller works, but it's kind of like it's like an oblong shape to it. So there's more sensitivity when you're going up and down versus right and left. Obviously, with these joysticks, it's more uniform, so it doesn't really work out the same way, which causes some issues in some mini games that require very sensitive flicking of the joystick. But for the most part, these have gotten the job done. No, I haven't gotten too many complaints where somebody's like, oh, if I had a regular controller, this would have been better. Like if you're playing Smash Brothers, Mario Kart, most games, you're pretty good with this one. Now, this is where the fun kind of starts. So I got one of these off of AliExpress. They are the Super 64 Flash Cart. Everybody was buying the premium brand. The name of it escapes me actually at the moment. But I ended up finding these for like 20 bucks off of AliExpress. Decided to pick one up and just give it a shot. I know a lot of people just didn't trust it because they're like, oh, you know, that looks like a knockoff and putting that in my console is going to screw it up. I've had this in my Nintendo 64 for at least 6 years now, I think. And it's worked out fine. Have had no issues with it. It comes with an SD card with ROMs that are actually preloaded. But of course, because this is not a piracy channel, I deleted all of those ROMs because that's very bad behavior. And I just backed up my own Nintendo 64 games onto this cartridge. And in general, it works out very well. Now, this setup allows you to effectively have all of your Nintendo 64 games onto a single cartridge. No more pulling one out, putting another one back in. None of that wear and tear. These cartridges are getting older. They will die out over time. So being able to store everything on here lets you preserve your physical media. And you can do so legally by obviously dumping out the ROMs from your own cartridges and throwing them in here. They also have like the PAL region and the... yeah. Okay. But there is more to this than just simply being able to play all of your games in one cartridge. And for that, let's boot this bad boy up. Primarily, what you see in the bottom here is what I actually use it for. So these are Romhacks. Most of you already know what these are, but in case you don't, it allows you to take a Nintendo 64 game, or any game really, and find a way to modify it to make it just that little bit more enjoyable. So some of the favorite ones that I still use quite a bit to this day would be Donkey Kong 64, the Tag Anywhere hack, Dragon Ball Kart 64. This has kind of become our default way to play Mario 64 now. I actually made a video on this ROM hack. It's probably like the second video on my channel, I think. Super Mario 64 Split-Screen Multiplayer. I'll admit this one doesn't work the best on the original hardware, and it works much better if you're emulating it on a more powerful machine. GoldenEye 64. It's GoldenEye ROM hack that takes place in the Mushroom Kingdom in the Nintendo 64. And then perhaps my favorite one is Smash Remix. Now, for Smash Remix, there have been significantly more updates throughout the course of the past few years. I haven't updated them in a long time. I'm long overdue for one. I think there are some more characters that I haven't gotten a hold of. But for what it is, it gets the job done for whenever we just feel like playing Smash 64. Which, honestly, is the main reason we kept this Nintendo 64 usable for as long as we did. Because we'd spend most of our summers just revisiting Smash 64. But as you can see, it looks like Smash Brothers. It just says Remix underneath it. The colors will be slightly off compared to what you're used to. And that's primarily because of the Hyperkin cable that I'm using. That's kind of the sacrifice that you give for the cheaper entry point. Here's the character roster that you're looking at, and I think there are more characters that have since been unlocked. There are also like little fun secrets where like you go over Luigi, if you hit up on the D-pad, you get to be the Mad Piano from Mario 64. If you go over Bowser, you press up on the D-pad, it's Giga Bowser. For Mario, there's a Metal Mario. And then most characters, they also have their Japanese variant or their polygon version as well. And then obviously you got Conquer, Mewtwo, some characters that have no place in this game, but they exist here. The one downside to this thing is that there is still no way to just go back and pick another game. You actually got to walk up to your Nintendo 64 and hit the reset button. And if I'm not mistaken, to save the game as well before you close out of a game, because normally these would automatically save onto your cartridge, you have to hit the reset button and then turn off the Nintendo 64 in order to make sure it stays saved. This is not really an issue anymore on some of the more recent flash carts, but because I got this a long time ago for 20 bucks, I am willing to just take care of all that if I have to. And I'll just quickly show you guys Dragon Ball Kart 64, because that's one that I enjoy a lot. You know, in the case of this one, it's the exact same game. Nothing changed technically. The tracks have had some color palette changes, and the character roster has been modified to be a Dragon Ball Z character roster. Or I guess in this case, Dragon Ball Super. But all in all, this one is pretty fun to play through if you're just looking for Mario 64, but you kind of want to put a different spin on it. Here's one that I will realistically be covering on my channel pretty soon, because I no longer like to play Donkey Kong 64 the original way. I feel like all of the backtracking was okay when I was a kid, but in a modern era of gaming, I just don't have that kind of patience. So obviously the big difference here is instead of going to the barrels that allow you to switch characters, with a simple push of the button on the D-pad, you're able to change characters. Honestly, once I played this version of it, it made it so that it was almost impossible for me to go back to the vanilla version. And I guess we'll close this off with one final showing. We have Mario 64 Split-Screen Multiplayer. I actually really enjoy this one, particularly because it gives you a chance to kind of play around with somebody else and find ways to collect multiple stars at once. Because if you grab a star, it starts the stage over. But if you grab 2 stars at the exact same time, you'll get to walk out of the stage with both of those stars. So you kind of have to do it so that you go to one star and your friend goes to the other star, and then at the same time you grab those stars, and you effectively can have the time of the game. But even the opening cinematic on this one's kind of choppy. And there you go. You got Mario and you got Luigi. There's the dream that everybody had when they were little kids, seeing Mario 64. And like I said earlier, this would do a lot better on actual stronger hardware. I wouldn't recommend this ROM hacking specifically playing it on the Nintendo 64, but it gets the job done if that's your only option. In any case, that's all I really got for you today. That was the Nintendo 64. If you guys enjoyed this, I might decide to do something similar with my Wii U, my 3DSs, and maybe even my original Switch. We'll see. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this little showcase of basically what was my favorite console of all time through most of my life. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.